Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FPC Radio Live. It's Wednesday, August 17th, right? Yep, that's what it is, August 17th. I forgot. I checked it this morning when I put it on the lower third here. So welcome to the show. We are, again, every day we get on the air, we get closer and closer to NFL training camp. And, you know, obviously, I apologize. NFL, the start of the NFL season, we're already 1 week into the preseason. We have more preseason games coming up here, heading into the weekend. So, real football is just around the corner, John, but could there potentially be problems in Packerland? And I'm going to ask you, John, because you're our resident, Aaron Rodgers, guy. He said recently, and I'm going to pull up the quote here. Actually, I'm not going to pull it up on the screen. I'm just going to read it. But you know, I'm obviously being a little dramatic here, you know, because I like to stir the pot a little bit, as they say, John. But there are or have been some struggles with some of the younger receivers. Now, one of the biggest storylines this season, going into this season, is, you know, how are the Packers going to adjust without Davante Adams? And on this show, I've said it a lot. 29 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, 3,000 yards. That's what you have to replace when Davante Adams leaves. So, you know, the Packers, I don't think they did as good of a job as say the Chiefs did in replacing their star wide receiver, in terms of not obviously comparable individual talent, but, you know, spreading the wealth. I mean, the Chiefs went out and snagged a couple pretty good wide receivers to add to their mix. The Packers really did not, unless you want to count 2 games of great Sammy Watkins, and then everything else is nothing. But anyways, Aaron Rodgers, and I'm quoting, "The young guys, especially young receivers, we've got to be way more consistent. A lot of drops, a lot of bad route decisions, running the wrong route. We've got to get better in that area." John, cause for concern for Aaron Rodgers and the Packers.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without question, when you're talking about a veteran quarterback who has receivers that are 16 or 17 years younger than he is, and they've got 2 pretty prominent rookies in there, and Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, who I think both have potential to be good wide receivers, but they're rookies. And that's a difficult thing when you have a rookie wide receiver with a legendary quarterback. So, you know, obviously it's probably intimidating for the wide receivers. You're looking across the other side of the field, and you're seeing a guy that you probably grew up idolizing, or at least watched a lot of, and you know, said, "Wow, that guy's awesome. I want to play with him at some point." And then the dream comes true. So
it's like, isn't that the guy from Con Air?
Yes, the guy from Con Air is now the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. Yes, with his new tattoo and his ayahuasca method. But yeah, I'm sure Tom Brady deals with this in tenfold, because we're talking about someone who's more legendary and 6 years older, and you know, players are probably looking at him going, "Holy crap, my dad's younger than him." But yeah, it's going to be a process, obviously. The only thing, I mean, Davante Adams, I think you can make a case, is the best wide receiver in football. I mean, he's right there. Cooper Kupp had maybe the greatest year wide receiver ever had last year. But in terms of consistency over the last 5-6 years, Davante Adams is as good as it gets, if not the best. But I will say that in 7 games that he missed the last 3 years, the Packers did go 7-0, and Rodgers had 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 111 passer rating. So, I mean, I think he can survive without Davante Adams. It's just going to be more difficult, and he's going to have to learn to trust these guys, and they're going to have to earn his trust. So, yeah, it could be cause for concern without question. The thing that the Packers can kind of fall back on, believe it or not, is I think their defense is really good. I think they have the potential to have a top 5 defense, and they can run the football with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and a good offensive line. So this passing game can kind of evolve, and you hopefully get up to speed by mid-season, and then you've got a complete team. But they can still find ways to win with their defense and with their running game. I wouldn't say rely on special teams, because that's never very good, although they did add Rich Bisaccia as their new special teams coach, who's one of the top special teams coaches in the league, and actually was head coach in Oakland last year, led them to the playoffs. So it's not going to be so dependent on the passing game as much as maybe in the past, because I think they've kind of cultivated a pretty good deep roster.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we saw and I've talked about it, the last couple of years, I thought was the Packers' best chance to get back to and win a Super Bowl. I just thought that was kind of their I don't want to say peak because I still think they're going to be a very good team this year. I just think these last two seasons was the best version of both the Packers and I think Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career. Again, I'm not making the assumption that he's gonna. One, he said he doesn't want to play till he's 45, and two, I'm just not going to assume that he's gonna play at this very high elite level into his 40s. I mean, it's just not something that happens. I know, obviously, oh, Tom Brady, but let's forget about Tom Brady for a minute. And so to me, I looked at the last couple seasons. I'm like, okay, this is the season that you're going to want to, one of these seasons you're going to want to have to make it back to the Super Bowl. Now, do they necessarily win it? That's another thing. But getting back, I think, says a whole deal about what the team is. But they didn't do that. So I don't think they got. I do agree that I like their defense, John. I really do. I just don't know if I like their offense enough. And I pointed this out before. Even with Devontae Adams last year, they were barely a top 10 offense, points per game wise. And look, I know it's not the be all end all, and there's certainly been worse offenses, but that is something that I'm like, okay, well, what happens if they do take a step back even from that point? Then you're talking about middle of the road offense. And is that really a Super Bowl contender in this league? I mean, you have to have a great defense, no doubt about it. But you also need a really good offense, or at least the capability of having a really good offensive stretch or run. And I mean, I don't know, middle of the pack doesn't really scream great offense to me. And, kind of to your point about, well, over 7 games without Devontae Adams, those comparisons are tough because we're hearing them about Tyreek Hill as well, because they're not, uh, you know, they're not consecutive. And I think you can have success, obviously. I don't know who the opponents were or what the situations were, but um, over the course of the long haul, an entire season, September, October, November, et cetera, that's where I think it's going to be a bigger factor. And that's where I think it's going to take some time for this team to adjust. I wonder if there's enough time for this team to adjust and get back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, they had 2 great opportunities the last 2 years. They were the number 1 seed. They put together great regular seasons, make a case they were the best team in football each of the last 2 years in the regular season. Then they get to the playoffs and they don't play at the level that they did in the regular season. And certainly the 2-time reigning MVP didn't play at the same level that he played at during the regular season. So that's a concern, without question. 2 lost opportunities. I think if they beat Tampa 2 years ago in the NFC Championship game, they go on and beat Kansas City. I feel very confident in that. And I do think if they beat the 49ers, they would have beaten the Rams in the NFC Championship game, because I think they really know how to play the Rams. They've had really good success against them. Sometimes teams just match up well against other teams. Seems like the Rams match up against Tampa. The Tampa matches up well against Green Bay. Green Bay matches up well against the Rams, but Green Bay can't beat San Francisco in big moments. So it's kind of this, inter scrimmage that these 4 teams have. And then I think they would have found a way to beat Cincinnati. So you could be looking at a team that be the 2-time reigning Super Bowl champs. Now, a lot would have to happen to get there, but the opportunity was there. Home field advantage is supposed to be key. That's supposed to be a tough place for an opposing team to go in and win. And unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers is only 5-4 at Lambeau Field in his career in the postseason. That just doesn't add up. Tom Brady has as many home losses as Aaron Rodgers in his career, home playoff losses in his career, except that Tom Brady has like 24 home playoff wins. So, that's been a real concern. He lost to the Giants in 2011, lost to the 49ers in 13, and then we know, of course, he lost to Tampa in 2020, and again, the 49ers again. And the thing that, everyone will show this, and you bring this up, and it's a great point. We're right now in the perfect spot for Aaron Rodgers, because it's 6-7 months removed from him winning or losing his last game of the season, which he's done every year since 2010. But we're, not quite into the season yet. The comment that we always hear is when he was drafted 25th or 24th by Green Bay, after San Francisco decided to go with Alex Smith, number 1 overall, and he says, I'm going to make them pay for the rest of my life. Well, he's 0-4 in the postseason against San Francisco. So I guess the lapse on him more so than San Francisco. Look, and in that period of time, San Francisco has not won a Super Bowl. Rodgers at least does have one. But yeah, no, the opportunities were there the last 2 years, and now they have to start fresh and try to figure out what to do with this passing game.
Yeah, and look, like I said, I still think you're talking about one of the top 3 teams in the NFC right now. As far as I'm concerned, there's been nothing to change my mind. I just don't think, a year ago you put them as bona fide Super Bowl contender, and I think maybe they're at the bottom part of that top tier, now, and probably maybe with one foot into the second tier, depending depending on how this goes, because they still have Randall. I say this kind of a little facetiously, but they still have Randall Cobb. They still have Alan Lazard, and I think Alan Lazard's a fine receiver. I think they're going to be just fine in that sense, but I'd be concerned, especially being this way, because you got to figure that any rookie wide receiver group is going to have its bumps along the way as you're learning the pro system and trying to come in. But to be fairly vocal about it this early on, that's what kind of I'm like, well, you got to kind of expect there's going to be a learning curve there, and maybe this is just a way of motivating them, and they're all going to be fine come the middle of September when Green Bay kicks off the season. But we'll see. This is kind of a nice little, I guess, segue into what we're going to talk about here next, and that is Maurice Jones-Drew over at NFL.com came out with the top quarterback pass catcher duo. And look, in years past, John, if you're coming out with the top 10, hell, if you're coming out with a top 5, you can guarantee that Rodgers and Devontae Adams are on that list. Obviously, that is not the case anymore. And it's actually, kind of to our point, has knocked Aaron Rodgers completely out of the running in this list at all. So before I give you kind of like the list, what do you think was the top duo? Who do you think he named as the top duo? Now, it's not just wide receiver, it's pass catcher and, taking into account receiver, running back, tight end.
I would say it's going to be either Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I don't know if you go with Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp after 1 year, although they did win the Super Bowl last year, and Cooper Kupp had one of the greatest, if not the greatest, receiving year ever. So I would say it's one of those two.
No, actually, hold on. I kept my mic on mute, so it kind of threw me off. No, actually, it's the other pair that made it to the Super Bowl last year, and that's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Which,
okay,
I'm not necessarily. I'm okay with that. Because again,
sure.
Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. I mean, I think Joe Burrow obviously has room for improvement. I think Jamar Chase is already an elite wide receiver in this game, but again, I think that can happen quicker than becoming an elite top tier quarterback in this league. I think that takes a little bit more time. Whereas wide receiver, I mean, you got to be very smart to play that position, but it's also very athletically it's geared toward, if you're athletically gifted, you can become a great wide receiver right off the bat. And I think Jamar Chase has obviously shown that he's a smart player who just incredible player. So I'm okay with ranking them number 1 together. To your point, to your discussion, they actually had Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp at number 3, and they had Mahomes and Travis Kelce at number 5. So a little off there, but you want me to give you the full list, and we'll react a little bit to it. So,
sure.
Number 10, Jameis Winston, Michael Thomas. Now, if they're both healthy, that could be pretty interesting. But again, I don't, that seems a far more projection than what we've actually seen. But hey,
they've never played together.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It seems a little.
Yeah, I mean.
Like I said, it's a whole lot of projection here, but Michael Thomas's talent, when he's healthy, is one of the best wide receivers in the league. Jameis Winston, I mean, had a really nice run with Sean Payton last year, but if you're going to ask me, am I banking on the 7 games last season or the totality of the rest of his career? I'd say it's probably going to lean a little bit further. So I probably wouldn't have them number 10. Maybe I'd put Rodgers and Alan Lazard at least. Number
Rodgers
9,
and anybody. Yeah. I mean, because doesn't this list kind of still favor the quarterback? I mean, let's be real.
Well,
I mean, it's still.
I don't know.
I would think.
I don't know, because this next one. Now, again, there's people that are a lot higher on Kyler Murray than I am, but Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, again, I think Hopkins has an argument to be considered the best wide receiver in the game. So I think this is certainly more heavily weighted towards the wide receiver in this situation. So as is,
I mean, I think he's a top receiver without question. I would take Kyler Murray over Jameis Winston. Murray's played 3 years, has shown some growth. Jameis Winston, I'm like, really? Okay.
Look, I mean, the Jameis apologists out there, are always, oh, his eyes, or oh, this, or oh, that, or Bruce Arians' offense this, Bruce Arians' offense that. Look, the reality of it is what we've seen so far out of Jameis Winston is that he has a whole lot of arm talent and some of the great qualities that you need to be a great quarterback, but he makes far too many mistakes, and this isn't anyone else's problem. That's his issue. Now, mitigating factors sure don't help it, but he has a turnover issue and he has a decision making issue. Now, if that improves and he gets better at that, now, then we're talking about a very elite quarterback. But to this point, the majority of his career says otherwise. So, number 9, Murray and Hopkins. Number 8, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen. I mean, you might be able to pick a couple combos from that offense this year, combined with Justin Herbert. Number 7, Dak Prescott, CD Lamb. Kind of, all right. 6, Mike Evans and Tom Brady. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, we already talked about. Number 5. Number 4, Derek Carr, Devontae Adams. I think that's obviously more receiver weighted, but
right.
I think Derek Carr's a pretty decent quarterback. I mean, nothing crazy, but it is what it is. Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, number 3, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, number 2, and then Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase at number 1.
Interesting list. The one change I would make is, how is Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen below Dak Prescott and CD Lamb? I think Keenan Allen is as good, if not a better receiver than CD Lamb, and I think Justin Herbert's better already than Dak Prescott and trending in the direction of being maybe the best quarterback in football at some point. So I would take the 2 guys from the Chargers over the 2 guys from the Cowboys if I was to change that order. And I also think Brady is too low. Mike Evans has had, I believe, 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Not that that's as impressive as it was, say, years ago when receivers were getting beat up and the schedule was shorter. Now, 17-game schedule. If the receiver averages 60 yards a game, they'll break 1,000 yards. But that's still pretty darn impressive. And Evans has been good in big games as well. I mean, even in postseason the last couple of years.
Big touchdown producer,
absolutely. So. Yeah, and you still have Brady. So, I mean, I think him at number 6 is a bit off. But again, there's a lot of really good combinations, and it's tough to put them in there if they haven't played yet. Now, I know Derek Carr and Devontae Adams played at Fresno State, 9 years ago. But I think the competition in the NFL is better than it is in that particular conference, which I don't even, is that the WAC or whatever the hell Fresno State's playing in? So, I mean, I think it's going to be a step up to see what these guys can do. And also in the terms of Devontae Adams, he's going from arguably the best quarterback in football to a guy who I think is like the 10th or 11th best quarterback. And I've said this before, by game 2, when he's barely open and Derek Carr doesn't get him the ball in a situation where Aaron Rodgers would put it right in his hands, he may get frustrated too, even though they're friends.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, like I said, I think this offense is going to be pretty good. They have some talent. Certainly, I think their defense is going to be really good. So it'll be an interesting team to watch. But I can see them putting them higher. I do agree. I think Brady and Adams should be, or I'm sorry, Evans should be higher on that list. I think 5's a little low, especially when obviously I believe Brady's still the best quarterback in the league. And I think Mike Evans is very underrated. I don't think he's the best wide receiver in the league, but not too far off. And he's a guy who, very, very quickly caught on with Brady and has produced a lot of big touchdowns over the last 2 years. It's funny to see how quickly he's, that graphic that shows all the jerseys of whoever caught passes from Tom Brady and the numbers, the totals. It was like the back of their jerseys. Obviously, a lot of Patriots up there, but there's a handful of Bucs jerseys, and one notably is Mike Evans, who has skyrocketed up that list over the last couple of years. So Um, yeah, I mean, interesting list. I mean, the top of it's pretty funky, or the bottom of the list rather is a little funky with again putting Jameis Winston and Mike Thomas in that. I'm trying to think who who could maybe replace that number 10 group pairing. I mean, we already mentioned Aaron Rodgers and pretty much any wide receiver, on that team. Although again, I don't think it's a lock because, who's their best wide receiver? Is it Alan Lazard? Maybe.
It's actually probably Aaron Jones, the running back.
Yeah. No, that's true.
I mean,
that's true.
Because they'll actually split him out wide from time to time. So yeah, I think when it's 3rd and 4 in a big situation, don't be surprised if you see Aaron Jones split out wide, and they throw to him. The tight end Robert Tonyan, a nice player who blew out his knee last October. So I don't know what his status is going to be. So he's got a lot of guys that would be considered like threes. Lazard's a classic 3, really good blocker, big body, but he's not an established route runner or anything like that. Randall Cobb is 117 years old. Sammy Watkins, like you say, will give you 2 to 3 good games, and then you got rookies that you hope can step up. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of interesting things there. I'm just trying to think of even other quarterbacks. I mean, I know you're not a big Russell Wilson fan. Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy maybe in Denver. I mean,
yeah,
Denver,
but
we keep hearing about.
Yeah,
but again, they've never played together, but neither have 2 of the other groups that are in the top 10.
I'd probably, and again, I'm not a huge Russell Wilson. And, when I say I'm not a huge Russell Wilson guy, it's just certainly not to the level that some people are. Some people think he's a bona fide Hall of Famer, blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. I'm like, all right, guys, he's a really good quarterback. I'm not ready to go into legendary or this elite or Hall of Fame. Or I'm not ready to do that right now. But I'd put him if we're going to consider players that we haven't seen play together. Sure, why not? I'll put him and Jerry Jeudy above Winston and Michael Thomas. So, but now that I think about it, I am trying to come up with like these combinations. I mean, is it Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson? Could that?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's not a bad choice.
That's actually, honestly, I'd probably take that over, at number 10 at least. You know what I mean? Certainly over a combination that we haven't seen before. And we're not talking about like, look, I mean, going into 2000, well, maybe a little bit revisionist history, but like, I think people would give Tom Brady and Randy Moss the benefit of the doubt. Not like, you know what I mean? When they came together, it's like, okay, they're both, again, we got to think too, the talk about Randy Moss coming into that season was a lot different than after that season. But I don't think anyone's sitting there saying like what we're talking about with Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas. It's like, well, no, like we knew who Brady was. We knew who Moss was. So realistically, you could say that duo could be great. And certainly it was. So we're not, we don't really have that with those guys. It's like Winston, I'm like, again, am I waiting his last 7 games or his entirety of his career? Well, okay, his entirety of his career was a lot of ups and downs. That's what it was. Ups and downs. You had some great moments and you had some bad moments. So until I see more, we'll have to see. So before we wrap up the show here today, a little bit of news out of New England, and a little disappointing for anyone who wanted to see the comeback come together. But Malcolm Butler was placed on injured reserve yesterday, and unfortunately for him, that ends his season, ends his comeback, and he will not be donning the number 4 for the Patriots secondary this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, you always root for Malcolm Butler, right? I mean, just his story is so fascinating. Where he came from, and obviously the play made in the Super Bowl win over the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, to me, is the biggest defensive player in the history of the Super Bowl, right? I mean, if he doesn't make that play and Seattle gets the ball in the end zone, a lot of legacies have changed. Because then it would be 10 straight years without a Super Bowl for the Patriots, and who knows what happens after that. And meanwhile, Russell Wilson would have won back-to-back Super Bowls. So, at that point, it would be Brady 3, Russell Wilson 2, and Russell Wilson being, 10 years younger. So, yeah, that's how big that play was. And just someone that you could really like, right? Because he was a guy out there, he wasn't necessarily the most talented guy, but he battled. He was physical. He'd come up and, hit the running back on the run. He was just a guy easy to root for. And then, we know he didn't play in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, goes to Tennessee, plays pretty well there, but then his play starts to tail off, and now he's 34 years old, not a real big cornerback, so
physical,
his athleticism, I'm sure, is very physical. Yeah, a guy 5'10", probably 185, 190, but he gave you everything he had. Very easy guy to root for, and unfortunately the hip, and he's going to miss the season. I would assume his career's over. I don't think he'd come back from that because he didn't even play last year. So, 2 years off to come back from, it's pretty difficult for a guy who at that point would be in his mid-30s.
Yeah, especially at cornerback. And we've seen, defensive backs that have long careers that start out as corners usually shift to safety at some point. I think Charles Woodson and everything like that. So, it's disappointing. I would have liked to see him back out on the field, but, trying to put ourselves back into that immediate post Super Bowl 52 and everything that transpired after the fact, that it seems like there are obviously no hard feelings. There's no resentment, obviously, between the team, but specifically Belichick and Malcolm Butler, which seemed to be the talk of the town for, or it felt like 100 years, but clearly it was only for like 2. But you know what I'm saying? Like there seems to be just that lack of like they've obviously buried the hatchet if there was an issue stemming from that benching or whatever, and it kind of makes all that discourse back then seem even sillier than it did then.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bizarre game. Here's a guy who played 99% of the snaps in the regular season, played all but I think one snap in the AFC Championship game against Jacksonville, and he doesn't take the field other than I think one special teams play. Meanwhile, Philadelphia is going up and down the field and scores 41 points. So yeah, that would be make you think about what the heck's going on. But yeah, good that he came back.
To be fair, I mean, to be fair, this is the same guy, and I'm talking about Belichick, who benched Wes Welker because in a playoff game, not for the whole game, obviously, but taking him out voluntarily still hurts your team. But he did it to prove a point and to really hammer home that no one's above the rules or no one's above the just the theory, the foundation of what the Patriots play for, and that's whoever's playing best. Or we've heard different stories about why Malcolm Butler missed it or missed that game or it's benched or whatever. But at the end, it seems like again, no hard feelings between the two.
I liked Wes Welker's foot jokes. I thought they were really good.
They were hilarious.
I thought he was fantastic.
I'm sure Belichick in a way even enjoyed him. I mean, come on, it's some fun stuff right there.
There were a few guys throughout this 20-year period that weren't afraid to speak up, and I think obviously Wes Welker was one of them. I don't think there was a lot of love there with Belichick because it was more about money. I mean, he was constantly battling for money, and the other one was Mike Vrabel, who was just ready, willing, and able to have some laughs at the expense of Belichick. He had no problem doing that. He was the one guy I don't think that was totally intimidated by Belichick, or at least not. Well,
he was also a free agent, coming over from Pittsburgh, and there was, there's certain players that, and obviously maybe you can see it now, obviously because Mike Vrabel's a coach, so Belichick back then maybe sensed a little bit in him then. So you know what I mean? There was that commonality that maybe wasn't quite apparent, but I'd say probably Rodney Harris. But Rodney was, I think he'd speak his mind, but he was like, yes, coach, no coach,
sure,
yes, Mr. Kraft, that type of thing, like with the utmost level of respect and whatever. But I'm sure he could certainly speak his mind. But that's the thing; those guys speak their mind, and like as much as I love the Wes Welker thing, that was out of line. Like, what do you expect was going to happen when you go up there? And it's like, look, as someone that was unbelievably entertaining for me, I loved it. I loved every second of it. But knowing the organization, knowing the Patriots, of course that was out of line. Are you kidding me? Like he went up there and made and I'm trying to think from a team perspective or a Belichick, juvenile foot jokes, and it's like, of course you're going to get punished for that. But for me, from my perspective, I loved it. It was great. But so Malcolm Butler, injured reserve. Unfortunately, the comeback is over. And I agree with you. I don't think he's going to be playing again because you just 2 years off, mid-30s. Yeah, it's not going to happen. So That's going to do it for us here today. We will be back throughout the week. Again, we're getting closer and closer to the start of the NFL season, so I'm pretty excited about that. So give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live, at Full Press Radio, and of course, head over to fullpresscoverage.com, fullpresshockey.com, and all your Full Press websites will be linked there. So check it out. Have a great Wednesday.